Oh, salmon. I don't know. There's a town in the middle of Idaho that I haven't visited yet. I've got 10 of the 11 discovered, so there is an achievement for discovering all of the cities in each state. I'm going to go get that last one in Idaho. Hopefully I can find something going from Eugene to salmon. I've actually heard people called the fish, the food they eat, salmon. I've heard people call that salmon. I mean, it's one of those things that makes me lose a little bit of respect for someone when they mispronounce something so badly. And I know a lot of people don't have that kind of experience in their life. They've never had salmon. They've never heard someone else say it. They've only seen it on a menu and they order the salmon. I don't hate everybody. I just lose a little bit of respect. Just a little. There's a town in Oregon called Dalles. I think it's, yeah. I don't know if that's Dalles or Dallas. I've been saying it in my own mind, Dallas. I just avoid saying it on camera because I don't know how it's pronounced. But if you're from Idaho in that town, let me know how it's pronounced. Is it pronounced like the fish? Or do you say it like salmon? Because that's where I'm trying to head to today. You want to talk about people mispronouncing names of towns. Holy cow, go to the middle of Missouri. It was originally, not discovered, but explored by the French explorer LaSalle, I think. So there's a bunch of towns in the middle of Missouri with French-sounding names, and it is funny how the locals, pronounce those town names, because you look at it on a map, and if you have a little bit of French speaking in your background, you can kind of pronounce things out the way the French would say it. That is not how the people from Missouri say it. It's funny. When the Missouri DLC comes out and I play that on my channel, I'll explain some ways that the locals pronounce the town names over there. It's kind of funny because the way you read it is not the way they say it. It's funny to me because I have family down there, but it's cringy if you're not from there, how people say the town names. Let's go back and get that Boise one for 24,000. All right, that'll get us close. You might notice I'm in a different truck today. I'm in a Kenworth. I jumped in my 100th anniversary Kenworth W900. I had it painted with the stock configuration, the stock black and red paint job. I kept the red frame, but I changed the body color just to see what it looked like with a red and black cherry, or a black and black cherry paint scheme. I don't see any cars over there. We look good. Actually, that hood mirror is quite off. Oh, I can picture the road to Boise because you come out of Nampa, you're driving into Boise, and I always look to the right and I'm like, everything I see reminds me of her. I always make the same joke every time I pass down whatever interstate that is between Nampa and Boise. Oh yeah, this is the truck. It does have some red in there. I forgot what the paint job looked like. It's got a lot of black, some red, and then I call it black cherry, that red color. It's just a really dark red. Pretty much anything that looks like dark red I call black cherry because I like that color. I can do this from the truck, I just choose not to. This is just a really cool looking truck. I love the old style of truck with the W900s and the Peterbilt, whatever it's called. Slow and steady keeps my truck scratch and dent free. I am straightening the wheel as I drive forward. Alright, there we got it. Oof. Such a long truck, man. Alright, just so I can... Yes, I was going to say so I can maintain my reputation. I'm not going to drive over the sidewalk, but screw it. I'm driving over the sidewalk. My goodness. Yeah, you gotta put a fence up, don't you? You gotta make it look like it's secure. It's so much easier if you could just pull out of there and onto the road right from the dock. Stupid companies. Alright, so the whole point of this video is to do more of my dad series. So let me read some comments from here and see what See what kind of questions they're asking. How would you describe yourself as when you were a kid? Oh my God, aren't all kids the same? I mean, I was gonna say I can't really think of anything to describe myself as a kid, but let me just tell you this. Okay, kids today, they're all different. You could have a kid that's a video game kid. You could have a kid that's an imagination play kid. You could have a kid that's an outdoor kid. You could have a sporty kid. You know, all these different kinds of kids. I don't know. In my neighborhood where I grew up, we were kind of all the same. I mean, some of us had video games, which were a thing. We played them sometimes, but, you know, for the most part, if you grew up in the 80s, you were all outdoor kids. There was no such thing as a indoor kid. You just had those side things you did sometimes. Like, I was never allowed to play sports. I was just too poor. I couldn't afford all the equipment you needed to play organized sports like some were. I'm jealous of those kids who were lucky enough to play, like, organized baseball. But I played plenty of baseball. We had an empty lot next to our house growing up, and that's pretty much all we did was play baseball. That was a rental house from when we first moved up north from Missouri to Illinois in '83, where we had the empty lot next to our house. But we lived in that rental for a year or two until we found a house. Actually, it was 2 years because it was in 5th grade when we moved from the rental to another house in the same neighborhood. So we didn't have an empty lot next to us anymore, but we moved in and there was a neighbor that had a basketball hoop. My name's Tom. Their kid, who was like a year younger than me, his name was Tom, and he had the basketball hoop. So baseball, I mean, I've always loved baseball, but that was the year that basketball became my thing. And so that would have been 85. Michael Jordan had been drafted by 85, but I wasn't watching the Bulls yet. I didn't really pick up on the Bulls on my radar until 87 when they got Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen. That's when the Bulls really became my thing. I was playing basketball every day out on the driveway at my neighbor's house and watching the Bulls from pretty much 87 until Jordan retired. And we were outdoor kids. I mean, that was just the way we were raised. If we weren't playing basketball, we were on our bikes exploring farther than our parents probably thought we were going. I saw a thing on Facebook yesterday where somebody posted that they would ride their bikes down Illinois Route 120 to Lakehurst Mall. Now, we lived in Round Lake Beach, and I don't know where the guy lived that posted that. It was like a high school alumni page. He bragged about riding his bike from Round Lake Beach to Lakehurst Mall, which is in Waukegan. It's like a 15-mile, it's probably a 10-mile ride, but it takes a little longer than that because it's all back, slow roads. But the point being is I can't imagine ever riding my bike that far. I thought I was pretty much top of the heap by riding a few miles to go places. I mean, we rode places that our parents would have killed us if they found out we were riding that far. But for someone to say they rode to a town that's a few towns away to go to a mall, I never would have thought about that. And I'm keeping the idea possible that he could be lying about riding his bike to Lakehurst Mall. That doesn't take away from me and my friends riding all over Timbuktu to get to a convenience store that we thought might be better than the one close to our house, or a gas station that might sell something that was different from the gas station by our house, whatever. We rode our bikes everywhere. And not just in the daytime either. We did sleepovers back then, and we would be out in the middle of the night riding our bikes around neighborhoods. And today, if you saw 2 or 3 teenage boys riding their bicycles around a neighborhood, you would automatically think they're up to no good, but we were doing that all the time. I'm not saying I had any wisdom as a teenager, but I kind of figured that if I gained my parents' trust by the time I became a teenager, that I'd probably be able to get away with a little bit as a teenager. So I never really got into too much trouble. And then, thankfully, as a teenager, I got left alone by my parents. They didn't hassle me too much. We never got hassled by the cops. We just did kind of whatever it is we wanted to do and went about our business. Now, we never committed any crimes. We never committed any crimes on our bicycles in the middle of the night. I'll put it that way. Oh, man. What's the statute of limitations on a burglary? I did do a burglary once. That one might be enough for a whole other video. You have to let me know if you want to hear that story. Desperate kids looking for stupid items. But for the most part, we would just ride around and explore the neighborhoods, and that was when we did a lot of our riding, was just because we were bored in the middle of the night on a summer sleepover. Anyways, I don't know if that describes me as a kid, but as a younger kid, man, I just can't. I'm racking my brain trying to think of things to talk about. I remember Garbage Pail Kids being a thing. They were like collectors cards. They were it's just some other stupid toy to get you to spend money, obviously, but it was a series of collector cards that you could collect, and I collected them like baseball cards. I had a baseball card collection, which I have no idea where it went now, but back in the day I was pretty proud of it. And I had the Garbage Pail Kids also, and then they came out with Series 2, Series 3, and then they had all these different generations of Garbage Pail Kids where they introduced new characters, new cards, all that kind of stuff. But I think probably every kid was doing that. That wasn't what made me special. What else? I always thought I was the weird kid for going to church as much as we did as a kid. Like, my dad was a preacher, so we went to church every time it was open, and sometimes when it wasn't. I always just thought we were the only kids who ever went to church. Later in life, I found out that the girl that lived 2 doors down the street, she was a Sunday school teacher as a teenager. She went to church as a kid. A girl I dated in high school, she went to Lutheran church regularly with her mom. I just always assumed I was the only one who ever went to church, and then I find out as an adult, like, all of us kids were going to church. We just kept it quiet and never talked about it, because we were all going to different churches, you know. Like the one guy in my neighborhood that went to my church, I knew he went to church. We were in Cub Scouts together. We went to church together. Pretty much our families were inseparable. But other than that, you didn't know other kids went to church. So I thought I was the one who stuck out as the only one. Turns out pretty much everybody in my neighborhood was probably going to church. I could tell you that I used to mow the lawn at the church when I was a little bit older and could control the tractor. The church that my dad started out in like rental places where other people took care of the properties, but when the church finally got big enough where we bought a piece of property and built a church building, you got volunteered or voluntold to do things when you're the preacher's kid. So one of my things was I had to mow the lawn at the church, and it was a big piece of property, and we mowed probably more than we needed to, but we mowed everything. It was probably, I think it was 6-point-something acres, and we probably mowed 1.5 acres of it to keep it looking nice for Sunday mornings. And then I was also an usher at the church where I grew up. And then for a while there, I remember as like a 16 or 17-year-old, I was the head of a committee for outreach. That was like a short-lived thing, because I was so young and getting ready to join the Army. That didn't last long. I ended up leaving. I never really thought about how I left that church. Like, there was no animosity, obviously, because I was joining the Army to go away. But I didn't, like, make any announcements. I didn't really tell anybody. I don't remember telling anybody. I remember telling my parents that I was joining the Army, but I don't remember telling anybody else. I signed up with the recruiter, and I want to say it was February, March, April, May, so 3 months later, I was gone. I must have told people, but I don't remember resigning from these positions. It was just a matter of somehow people found out and knew that they would have to step up and take over those few jobs that I did at the church. I don't know, I guess I've always been bad at saying goodbye to people. It's one of the things my wife helped me learn to do better when I married her, was when you're leaving a party, you don't just walk out the door. You actually have to announce you're saying goodbye and, you know, give a hug to family members. I grew up where it was just like, I'm leaving, bye, and you just walk out the door. I guess that's not the polite way to do things. But when I left the church, I just kind of remember just leaving. Just one day I was gone. I used to do this stupid thing when I was a kid. I've always loved driving, which is why I have a job where I drive and I play video games where I drive. My parents, in 1988, I would have been 13 years old, they got a brand new, it was the first new car that I experienced them buying They bought an 88 Dodge Aries K. And if anybody remembers those cars, you remember how garbage they were. But it was brand new to us. It was still had the sticker in the window when they brought it home. Had 13 miles on the odometer or whatever it was. And it was our first new car to experience as a kid. So when I got my driver's license, we had that car, plus we had a Ford van. I drove the Ford van to school most of the time. But when we went to church, I was an old-fashioned Uber service. I would go and pick people up and bring them to church. So if there was an old person who, couldn't drive anymore, I'd go pick them up and bring them to church. There was a couple of Navy guys. I'd have to go to the Navy base and pick them up and bring them to church. There was a family. I started out thinking I was going to tell you one story, and my ADD is taking over. I want to jump from story to story to story. That whole thing about being the Uber for church was quite something, because it would get me out of an hour of church every Sunday. One of the guys I picked up from church was an old man who lived in the apartments behind Grant High School on Devlin Road. I'd go and pick him up, and he would meet me out on the porch and get in the car, and I'd drive him to church and then drive him home after church. I never thought anything of it. I just thought I was, doing a nice deed, helping a guy get to church. That old man passed away, and his family got into contact with my parents. My parents told me the story later, how much that guy liked me. I mean, it's just a dumb kid giving a guy a ride, and the conversations or something must have been a big deal to him, because he told his family about me, without me knowing. And then at his funeral, my parents found out the story from his kids that he had talked about me behind my back, saying how nice of a kid I was and what kind of personality and all that. And his family just appreciated that I was willing to go pick him up using that Dodge Aries K. And the word finally got back to me, so I thought that was kind of nice. That might have been my first ever experience with having a good deed come back to you, where you hear about it after the fact. I guess I don't need my turn signal there, but I started out telling the story about the Dodge Aries K because it had a little flip-down armrest in the center of the front two seats, and I would always have a water bottle or a soda bottle, probably because I was a teenager. And I would rest my right arm on the armrest with my left hand on the steering wheel and my right hand gripping a Pepsi bottle like it was a gear shifter. And as the car accelerated, I would pretend like the Pepsi bottle was a gear shifter, and I would row through the gears as it went up. Now, those cars were crappy cars. They were only 4-cylinder cars. A lot of people don't remember because they don't care about those cars, but they only had 3-speed automatic transmissions. So I was pretending to row through gears on a 3-speed automatic. Such a dumb kid, just, to me, driving always represented freedom. I mean, just being able to get out and go wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, drive as far as you wanted. As long as you could afford the gas, you could go anywhere you wanted. So that's why I always loved driving. The old man was just one of the guys that we picked up at a certain time. Other times I'd have to drive all the way to the naval base. Now, our church that we built was in Lake Villa, on the west end of Lake Villa. And I would drive by myself to go to the naval base to pick people up. And it was not just one service member. It was one for a couple of years, or no, it couldn't have been a couple of years. It was just different amounts of sailors from different times and for different lengths of time. But it was probably 2 or 3 different groups of sailors I'd pick up and drive to church for varying lengths of time. It's because we had I don't even know why I had to go all that way to pick up sailors from the naval base, but driving from Lake Villa to Waukegan, basically we would go to church early, and I would try to get to the naval base and back before church started at 10 o'clock, because my family would basically get dropped off at church, and then I would take the car and go to North Chicago. And then the old man he didn't need to go to Sunday school, so I just needed to get him to church by 11. So I would be basically driving every Sunday morning just to go pick people up for church. The miles just roll on by, thinking about the old days. I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe yourself as a kid. You just kind of tell stories and let people get a grasp of who you were or what you were like. I was always kind of upset as a kid that I never got a big wheel. It was a plastic toy It was a big wheel, so it had a big wheel in the front with like bicycle pedals attached to it, and it sat really, really low to the ground. And I had some friends of my cousin down in Missouri that had some, and there were some around the neighborhood, I'm sure. We never had any. Eventually they made them with brakes where you could pull up on the brake and it would hold a piece of plastic against the plastic back wheels and you could skid out and all that stuff. But I never owned one as a kid. We always had to play with someone else's. Holy cow, I didn't think I was going to stop it all there. But then I think back to the Christmases that we had, and it's like there was always Christmas presents, there was always toys. Just never that one thing. I'm not going to say I had a bad childhood because I didn't have the one toy that I always wanted. It was just the one thing that was always nagging me that I never got as a kid. One thing you would do with those big wheels is you would stand up on the back plastic piece that, like, there was a little bit of plastic behind the seat that you sat on that went between the two back wheels. You could put one foot on there and still steer. You'd lean over the seat, lean over the back of the seat, hold the steering handlebars, and then you'd push yourself off with your other foot. So it's kind of like a scooter, but with a big wheel. I don't know. They were fun little toys. I don't know why they don't still make those things. Those things are awesome. Why don't they make a big wheel anymore? I wonder if they were too dangerous or something. I got a grandson coming in the spring. Kid just might get a big wheel for Christmas. Probably why people love being grandparents so much. I never thought of buying big wheels for my kids because, I don't know, I just never thought of it. But if I would have thought of it, I would have went and got them a couple. They could have been riding around like crazy. Speaking of playing around outdoors, we would always go visit my grandpa who lived in Missouri multiple times a year. And I had a couple of cousins that lived near my grandpa, so every time my dad would go to visit my grandpa, I would be outside and we'd be playing with all the cousins. Whether it was playing football in the field next door or playing cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, whatever it is, running through the woods. We never built any forts, which seems crazy to me. We should have been building forts in the woods, but running through the woods, finding every little hole of water there was to find, and I don't even know how far we ever traveled through those woods, but that was like a big part of every trip down there, was exploring the woods around where my grandpa lived. I grew up and found out that my dad said there were black bears down there. I'm like, there's bears in those woods? I used to play and run all over the place in those woods. I never saw a bear. People talk about all the snakes that are down there. I never thought of snakes being in there when I was playing as a kid. I would have probably never gone out in the woods if I had known there was a snake out there. I remember a couple of different times where we would play football. There was one particular Thanksgiving down in Missouri where we visited, and there was a bunch of, everybody was at my grandpa's house. And that was the day we played football literally all day, and we just separated teams and people jumped in. They left when they got tired and other people jumped in, and the game went all day, and you know, all the boys were like muddy from playing the whole game. And we finally got called in to eat, and someone asked what the score was, and we were like 132 to 117, or you know, whatever the score was. But it was in the hundreds because we kept score, even though it was more about tackling each other and wrestling in the mud. It was kind of fun that way. We only did that one year, though. We tried recreating that. It was just a special moment. Like, it was just so much fun. And we tried recreating it years later, and it just never worked again. It was just never as cool as it was the first time when we played to 100. Didn't even think twice about it. And then when we were home, I remember we had a small little yard in the house that we bought. A little front yard, a little backyard. My little brother and I, Brad, we used to play football in the front yard. And literally from the front steps, there was a sidewalk going up to the front steps. From the sidewalk to the road couldn't have been more than 15 or 20 feet. And we would play football in that little spot. And it wasn't really so much about scoring football. It was about just tackling each other. He'd get the football and start running. I'd tackle him, and he would giggle like crazy. And then I'd get the football, and he'd try and tackle me. And it was more about wrestling in the front yard than it was about playing football. But that's what we did back in the day. When we bought that house, there was every house had an antenna on it back then. Cable was pretty rare. It did exist, but it was rare. Most people just lived off of the antenna that was 30 or 40 feet tall in the back of your house. So we had one of those poles attached to the back of the house that had the antenna on the top of it. And whoever had the house before us put a basketball hoop on that pole. So there was a basketball hoop in the backyard in the grass where we could play basketball. That's why we always went to the neighbor's house, because they had a basketball hoop, like a regular basketball hoop on their driveway. But we had one in our backyard. And we ended up, it was just a piece of plywood with a metal hoop on it. We ended up doing a slam dunk competition and ended up ripping the hoop off of it. So that was the end of that basketball hoop. My dad finally took the plywood backboard down. And then somehow, one of those years, we ended up getting a above ground pool for free. And I don't know where we got a free pool at. All we had to do was get it and assemble it. And I remember it was an oblong, like oval pool. And we had a pool in our backyard for like a summer or two. I don't even know how long we had it. I remember swimming in it, but it was like the house was so small. And then there was a 2-car garage in the backyard, and then the pool took up the rest of the yard. So there was really no yard left to maintain. It was all filled with garage and house and pool. But that was only for a couple of years. For some reason we got rid of the pool. I'd like to know why we got rid of that pool. I don't know why. I don't know if it went bad or something happened to it and it got damaged and we just got rid of it, or something I'll have to ask my parents about the next time I see them. I remember we had one of those like kid pools in the first rental house we lived in the backyard. It was just a little 18-inch tall, 6 or 8 feet wide pool. But it wasn't an inflatable. It was just a piece of rubber on the ground, and then plastic sides, and the water is what held the sides up and kept it in shape. And that was in our backyard at the rental house, and we were playing with it one summer, playing around it, and one of my neighbor friends was playing with this long stick of metal. And I know who it is, but I'm not going to say his name, Robert. But he was playing with this piece of metal, and it slipped out of his hand when he was pretending to throw it, and he actually threw it on accident. And it like stuck into the side of the pool and ruined the pool. All the water came flooding out. And I don't remember what it was, but I don't remember what the lie was, but I lied to my dad about how it happened or what happened. And I got more in trouble for lying about it than for damaging the pool, because obviously my parents knew that it was just a junky old cheap pool meant to keep kids. I mean, you couldn't swim in it. It wasn't big enough to swim in. So, I mean, they weren't going to be that upset about ruining the pool, but they were more upset about lying about it. So I learned from a pretty young age. We lived in that house from the time I was in 3rd grade till 5th grade. So I learned pretty young that you get in trouble more for lying about stuff than just telling the truth and taking your lumps for whatever it was you did stupid. Even at work to this day, I still have the same attitude. I'll tell my bosses the truth if I mess something up. I'll take my lumps, because you're getting more trouble by lying about something. That was a lesson I learned as a kid, and I can still remember the lesson that I learned, because it was all about that pool. When we moved into that first rental house, it was move-in day. We had a truck outside, still unloading the truck, and these 2 teenage boys came over and knocked on the front door, and we're like, who in the world could be visiting us? It's literally, we're moving in. And it was the boys. Jen was my friend. She was my age. I didn't meet her until later when we started school, but her older brothers came to our house the day we moved in and knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, whatever. And they're like, I was in the living room when my mom answered the door, and they're like, do you have any kids we could play with? My mom's like, they're helping us move, so who are you? Where do you live? Yeah, they'll be available to play some other time, but right now they're busy helping us. Because my brother would have been a middle schooler. He could have helped move stuff and carry boxes, so they were going to use them. I'll never forget them asking, do you have any kids we could play with? That's pretty funny. Why does that guy get to pass up the way station and not me? Growing up in the 80s, I didn't really talk about my time before pretty much every story I've told has been about me in Illinois. From the time I was in 3rd grade and after. I do remember some stuff from before that, but I've talked about that stuff before. living in the double white trailer down in southern Illinois where I was born. I mentioned that on one of the other videos talking about this dad book. I lived there from the time I was born until I was about 7.5. We moved to Missouri for a year. I went to second grade in Missouri. Little school. We were in a tiny little town called Belgrade. You can look it up. It's still small. It is bigger than I remembered because we lived on the main county highway or state highway, whatever it was, that went through the little town. And we were at one end, close to the Big River Bridge. And I remember there being like 5 churches and a convenience store and a bank. Maybe the convenience store had a gas station. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But that's how small the town was. And we lived in that small town, and the school was right there, the grade school. But the high school was like farther. It was farther away in the county. It was like a county school. So that's where my brother and sister went. And then I went to second grade at the little school in the town. There was like a little girl I had a crush on. I remember her first name was Amy, but I don't remember anything about her except that she was pretty. And she didn't go to our church. But she went to one of the other churches in the town. Like I said, there was like 4 or 5 churches. And there was like literally like 3 churches next to each other on the main drag through town. I remember there was a creek that ran behind our house. Well, the Big River Bridge went over the Big River. And I don't know if that was the Big River behind our house, but I remember it being small at times where you could go and play in it. Little rocks on the edge, and then you could kind of wade out into it and get wet and throw rocks, and it was all in the trees. I don't remember there being anything ever behind the house on the other side of that creek. I don't remember ever going across the creek to explore. Just always went down through the trees to the creek to play. I look at the map now, and there's a whole neighborhood behind that house on the other side of that creek. I'm like, Belgrade is a lot bigger than I remembered as a kid. Of course, back then, I mean, if you had a bike at that house, I don't know where you would have ridden it. I don't remember having a bike at that house because you're on a county or state highway, whatever. You're not going to ride your bike on that road as a 7-year-old. And we couldn't ride it through the woods behind the house. So, yeah, I don't remember having a bicycle at that house, but the amount of exploring we did was based on how far we could walk down to the creek, and that was about it. There was a gravel driveway that went around the church, which was right next to where we lived. The little trailer was right next to the church. So there was a lot of driveway space to run around and play in, but I think mostly we just played in the backyard by the woods in that creek. I don't remember a lot of stories from living there. I was only there for a year, but what else was I like as a kid? I'm just telling stories. I'm not really telling you what I was like, but definitely wasn't afraid of getting my fingers dirty, getting my hands dirty, getting messy during playing around, but I don't know. If you think that kids today have it easy, I think you got it backwards. I think today kids have it harder. With social media, all the pressures from the way kids live their lives now, the kids definitely have it harder than we did back then. Yeah, they got a lot more cool stuff now than we had back then, but I think we had it easier. Oh, I should have stopped and gassed up. Oh, darn it. I guess I'll gas up in Boise. You know, back then, maybe it was the deniability. Like, I say it's easier, but I mean, it was just less stress. I think that's what made my childhood so great. How hard could your life be? You get called in for dinner, and you spend the rest of the day playing basketball. I remember I'd be playing basketball literally all day, every day. I'd get called in for dinner, and I would come in, and I'd walk in the front door, and I'd go straight to the bathroom and turn on the cold water and just drink from my hands until I couldn't drink anymore. And then just splash water all over my head, my hair, and rinse the sweat off to get ready for dinner. And there's no stress in that. Today, these kids everyone's got a cell phone and everyone's got social media, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but some of the kids get really, really stressed out about that stuff, and I definitely think kids have it harder today than I had as a kid. So, if you're an adult and you're listening to me, maybe you never thought about it, but the succeeding generations have it a little tougher than we do in certain ways. Tell you what, it would have been nice to not have to go walk to the library a mile and a half to look at an encyclopedia to write a book report for school. That sucked. You guys got it easy that way. Just go on your phone and look something up and Google it. You got to write a 2-page book report on the North Pole, and you go to the encyclopedia at the library, and there's a paragraph there. That was horrible. But if that's all I have to complain about, I must have had a pretty good childhood. I don't know if I ever told the melted gun story. We got an hour left. That's 3 minutes, 4 minutes. I'll tell you my melted gun story. I knew I grew up poor. I mean, I wasn't oblivious to it. Look at the line of cars behind me. Holy cow. There was one year where we just didn't have a very good Christmas, but after Christmas, we got gift cards for Sears for some reason. I don't know what happened. I should ask my parents about that, see if they remember that year, but we didn't get much for Christmas. There was something under the tree, but they basically said, hey, there's money coming in. We'll go shopping after Christmas. We had these gift cards that we all got to spend at Christmas. We got $50 to go to Sears and pick out whatever we wanted. So I ended up picking up this plastic Uzi gun. You know, you pull the trigger and it's got a little mechanical sound that makes it sound like it's a Uzi shooting. It's really cool. Anyways, I picked up this really cool plastic Uzi with the mechanical sound that made it sound like a real gun, and it was just like the coolest toy I ever had at that point. And I carried that thing everywhere. Well, the next trip we took down to my grandpa's house in Missouri, he had this little, it was a 3-bedroom, but it was tiny 3-bedroom house. There was 3 tiny little 10 by 10 rooms on one side of the house, and the other side of the house was a living room, and then a bathroom and a kitchen. And the little room where the bathroom was, right outside the bathroom, there was a wood-burning stove, and that basically was in the center of the house, and it warmed the whole house. You know, wood-burning stove heat. And the heat was unbearable in that room. That's where they stored the wood, right next to the wood-burning stove, and then there was the little wall that separated the bathroom from the rest of that room. So I ran in there one time to go to the bathroom, and I had my little plastic Uzi because, of course, I had a new gun. We were playing whatever war games we were playing out in the woods. So I ran inside, go to the bathroom, and as I ran in the bathroom, I laid that gun on top of the wood-burning stove just because it was a ledge to me. I had never dealt with a wood-burning stove as a kid. We always had, forced air heat in our house. Went to the bathroom and came back out, and my gun was gone. There was a pile of plastic sitting on top of the wood-burning stove. And I don't remember crying or screaming or anything else, but I'll remember till the day I die the puddle of plastic laying on the wood-burning stove where my favorite gun had melted into oblivion because, like every other kid, I was just a dumb kid, not thinking. I could have laid it on the log pile. I could have thrown it on the couch in the living room as I ran in through the front door. I could have done anything with that gun. Me being stupid, I laid it right on the freaking oven. Honestly, I probably would have forgotten all about that gun to this day if that hadn't happened. I remember what the gun looked like in the box on the bottom shelf of the Sears when we picked it out. And I remember the day that gun died on that wood-burning stove. But other than that, if I hadn't melted that gun, I would have probably never remembered it. I don't think I've done a video like this in a long time where I just rambled on. If you like my videos, leave me a comment. I was starting off the day thinking, oh, I'm going to eat my little toaster pastry and I'll tell people to leave a comment to guess what flavor I'm eating. I never opened it. I haven't eaten it yet. I'll get to editing to get this thing out on the airwaves, but I never got to talk about my toaster pastry. I ended up drinking most of my coffee, but I didn't finish it. I got the small cups today because whatever, I picked a small cup. Still didn't finish it. But if you want, I've got it right here. My little toaster pastry in the foil wrapper. Let me know what your favorite flavor is. Let me know what flavor you think I'm eating today. And if 3 or 4 people guess, I will tell you what flavor I'm eating. I know it doesn't matter. It's just a stupid game. Lighten up. One person asks me what flavor it is, I tell them, and then it gets boring real quick. So if I get 3 or 5 or whatever people asking me what or guessing what my flavor is, then I'll tell you what it is. It's not one of the more popular flavors. It's an obscure flavor. Not obscure, but more obscure than the popular flavors. And it is a big name brand of toaster pastry, so if you know anybody in the toaster pastry industry that wants to give me money to do an advertisement on my videos, hey, bring it on. I'll say a name brand, but I'm not giving it away for free. We are now in Idaho. Remember what I said in between Nampa and Boise? Let's get to Nampa first. It says I'm 8 minutes away. I must have missed it. Let's do this from the outside so we can see this beautiful truck. I will say this, those halo headlights are pretty freaking sweet looking. I missed my little feature in between Nampa and Boise. Actually, before I get going, let me look at the map. Maybe I missed it. Yeah, I just missed it. Normally when you come around this curve right here, you go under this underpass, and there's some stuff right here. I always look at it and be like, everything I see reminds me of her on this cold, lonely stretch of road. And I drove through in the dark. I must have missed it. Whatever. I stopped and got some rest so I could make this delivery in the daylight. My fingers are killing me today. I had one of those cool cop story moments yesterday at work where I had to break some glass and pull someone out of a car, and I had my gloves on, but I took my gloves off so I could check a guy's pulse, and I ended up moving some glass after I took my glove off. I got all these little micro cuts from this glass all over like 3 of my fingertips, and it freaking hurts. Got like, it feels like 100 paper cuts on the tips of 3 of my fingers because I smashed this window out. Why did I go this way? Oh my gosh. I was going back to the interstate, just not even looking at the map. And then after I took my glove off to check this guy's pulse to see if he was alive, there was this film that was on the inside of his driver's window to keep all the pieces of glass together, and I just reached to move it. And I didn't feel it at the time. You know, we did what we had to do to try and save this guy's life, and later on I'm bleeding. I'm like, what the heck? When did I get my fingers cut? I'm like, what the heck? I'm bleeding like an idiot. Like, I don't even know when it happened. I review the body camera footage later, and I'm like, watching it. I run up, I punch the window, use my elbow to clear all the glass out. I take my glove off and reach in, and then I'm like, change my mind, and I go to move this film that's in my way. And as soon as I touched it, I'm watching the video, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's how I cut them. Right there. That's when I did it. I know exactly when I did it now, but now I'm living with all these freaking little cuts on my fingers. It doesn't even hurt a lot. It just hurts enough to be annoying. You know, micro cuts. Stupid heroin junkie. And yes, the Narcan worked eventually, after he got enough of it. I think it was probably 4 doses. The guy finally wakes up. Hey, what's going on? Yeah, he got arrested. Not too many cop stories on this channel. Uh-oh, Bella's here next to me. Bella's gotten to the point where she hangs out next to me while I'm video gaming now. She's got a little bed in the corner, and she actually hangs out upstairs. There are some days where she disappears to go downstairs and hang out in the sunshine, but a lot of days she hangs out up here in her little bed next to me while I play video games. Nice little tight spot there. Let's see if we can get her in there. It's funny watching truckers online yelling at each other about how things should have been done, and you could have done this and blah blah blah, and it's like, dude. And then there's the other truckers that are like, as long as you didn't damage nothing and you got it where it needs to be, pull forward as many times as you need. Who cares? I'm one of those guys. Pull forward as much as you need. I'm just trying to get between the lines. In the real world, there wouldn't be lines on the ground. Like the flashing ones. The flashing white ones. I lost track of how many times I pulled forward, but whatever. There we go. I'm done. I had to pull forward like 18 times, but whatever. It's between the yellow lines on the wall. Actually, it's not in between the yellow lines on the wall, but good enough for me. We're going to deliver this load. I hope you liked the video by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'm Old Guy Gamer. This is American Truck Sim. Just another Dad, I want to hear your story video on the playlist. And I'll see you guys next time. You guys go watch some more videos. I'll go play some more games. Don't forget to leave a comment. Say hello. Bye. Salmon. We are definitely doing this job to discover it. Not even close to being center. Finally.